Hey guys, good afternoon. It is February 9th, 2018, 3:22 p.m. Alright, we are going to do a quick update on Mateo, which is currently affecting areas of Chicago, Detroit, and northern Indiana, especially those areas. There are many other areas getting snow from it, but those areas seem to be getting the brunt of this weather as we speak, and as it moves west to north, or west to east rather. Wow. Alright, so anyway, I have a map pulled up for you to give you a little bit of a direction and to show you where some of these accumulations are. Basically, bordering the bottom of Lake Michigan here is where we're seeing these accumulations. Now, Chicago has already been getting between 5 and 8 inches, and there is more to come. Probably another 5 to 6 inches in areas of Chicago. There's been a lot of accidents going on there. We also have a snapshot here from Detroit. Now, Detroit has had 5 inches already, as you can see on the roads. Roads are still covered. There is more snow to come, as well as Mateo continues its movements. Northern Indiana, once again, is also part of this heavier accumulation, which also has more snow to come. And this is before it makes it to the Northeast, which is expected over the weekend. Now, behind this system, believe it or not, is yet another system. Now, it hasn't been named yet. I'm not sure if they're going to name it. I'm still, to this day, not sure what determines the names of these storms. So your guess is as good as mine. If it will be named or not, I guess it depends on whether or not it drops snow. I mean, I guess that's how they work it. So basically at this point, like I said, these areas to the bottom part of Lake Michigan are getting hit the hardest. Now, Buffalo later on in the next day or two is going to get a significant amount of snow, and I can only assume that most areas to the east of that lake as well are going to get hit. Watertown, we always talk about, is going to get a decent amount of snow as well. Now, as of right now, there are over 19 million people under winter storm warnings because of this storm. The Weather Channel has actually quoted this storm as being the biggest snowfall of the season. Now, I guess that is combined, not in one area specifically, but is covering a certain amount of states. It is a combined total. This is going to last Thursday into Friday, at least for the areas around the Great Lakes. And then by the end of this, which I will show you here on Tropical Tidbits, you'll see when it moves out. Now, right here is about current time. You can see that strip right under Lake Michigan here is kind of that darker blue color. We also have some of those darker blues over in these areas as well as we move closer to New York and the upper areas of Pennsylvania. So I'll move this forward for you, and you can see how this is kind of like a beeline storm. It's kind of just a really flat, long strip, and then we're still continuing to get that warm air being pushed up from the Gulf, which is also the situation that we had with Liam. Now, we have, I brought up a couple charts here to show you that defined line here. You can see it's almost like there's this line of dry air that is moving through different parts of the middle of the U.S., upper Texas, and then, it moves all the way almost into the Atlantic Ocean, and it almost looks like it's separating the moisture down in the south from the cold air and snow in the north. So I brought up these two tables to give you an idea of how defined this is. So again, we have that upflow that's coming in from the Gulf, and usually once it reaches the coast, we have that high pressure that we always talk about in the Atlantic Ocean that basically pins this stuff against the coast, and that's why we end up seeing a lot of stuff, at least in the month of February, accumulate over the Northeast, which has been exactly what's been going on. Now, this is kind of a one of those low-key maps, but it does give you an idea over the next 3 days. It starts at the 10th. Down here at the bottom, you can see it begins at the 10th, rather, then goes to the 11th, and then ends at the 12th. So this is what to expect over the next couple days. Now, most of the coast of the Northeast will be rain. So that is a good thing. At least it's going to be warm enough to where it's rain. It might melt some of the snow away. I mean, that is a good and bad thing for areas that have frozen snow right now, because if it melts quickly, then you're dealing with flooding rivers and creeks and stuff like that, which is never fun. I happen to live in an area that floods pretty frequently. Even one we had last month was pretty bad. It was up to almost the roofs of cars in the bottom of the valley. So it happens quick, and it's all based on temperature, guys. And the same things with these storms. It's all timing. We're talking 1 degree could be the difference between snow and rain, and it's usually that 32 to 33 degree range. If you're anywhere in the low 30s, that is cold, and then if you are into the mid 30s, that usually keeps it rain. So this up and down we've been having has been causing these freezes and then these thaw outs, and then you get those situations that we had earlier in the season that I showed you pictures of the Susquehanna River. Was freezing and thawing so many times that the ice was actually packing up and almost damming the river. And then we would have a couple days of warmer weather, it would melt, and then it would cause flooding, which is what I was speaking about in towns like Pittston, in areas of Luzerne County in northeast Pennsylvania. But anyway, back to the point here, we can kind of see how this storm Mateo is kind of just like a flatline storm as it moves across. There is another system that is behind it, but it looks to me by this chart there's a high pressure moving down from Canada into the mid-US, which might bring this thing a little bit lower, almost as low as North Texas. So we just have to wait and see what happens over the next couple days with that situation. Again, I brought up this chart to show you that defined line that's cutting off basically the moisture in the south that is moving up and then usually follows the coast, and then that cold air and the beginning of these systems that have been coming from the upper west of the U.S. and then slowly moving across almost basically a straight line, which is why we're seeing not so much, this isn't so much a lake effect snow that's going on with the Chicago, Detroit, and northern Indiana areas. It just happens to be where this storm is dropping snow. I had a commenter below actually make a very good point that a lot of the Great Lakes are like in almost 80 to 90% frozen, and what that does is that actually stops the effects of lake effect. So unless you have a liquid water that is affecting, the atmosphere and being used as almost a tool to drop snow, it's almost a good thing if you want to look at it that way. I mean, when you hear frozen lake, all you can think about is cold, so that's no good, but at least it's not being used as a body of water to cause more snow. But once again, guys, like I said, Buffalo is expected to get hit with this storm, and it's expected to get pretty hard. And when you hear the word Buffalo, you got to think Watertown, and you got to think Lake Erie, which has already broken the record for most snowfall in a single season. I believe the number was 150. It was in the 150s, which was just much more than it's ever been before. So, and again, we still have a little over 2.5 weeks of February left, and then we can have our surprise systems in March. And then, guys, as we get into April, I don't have these charts pulled up right now, but the Gulf is getting warm. We are 80 degrees. Basically, if you see my mouse right here, from the southern tip of Miami, this entire circle right here is all 80 degrees. And if I had Ventu Sky pulled up right now, there is a track of wind that comes off of the west coast of Africa that goes right into the top area of South America, and you can slowly, over a couple weeks, you can see that line starting to level out. And that's why those storms that begin to develop in the west coast of Africa, they start moving down and they follow that wind line, and they just keep moving west until some sort of pressure, like we always talk about, whether it's the Bermuda pressure here that keeps them pinned down into these areas, or a jet stream front. For example, let's say we had a deep U here, and then we had a release in the pressure here, then it would follow that jet stream line right up the east coast. Or if we had an uplift in the jet stream and a high pressure in the Bermuda Atlantic, that would allow the storms to move to the west and continue west until the pressure is released. And then that's when we determine whether or not it goes up into the Bahamas, east side of Florida, or if we're going to be dealing with storms in the Gulf. And then, of course, later on in hurricane season, when they start forming down in here, your guess is as good as mine, as we remember from last season. So, all right, guys, that's it for Mateo as of right now. Don't get me wrong, Mateo is not finished by any means, but I'm just giving you a current update. The areas of focus right now are Chicago, Detroit, and northern Indiana, all seeing significant amounts of snow with another system right behind it. As you can see here, it is dipping a little bit lower this time because of a high pressure we just discussed that is coming down from Canada. And I'll just run you through the end of this one. And that is what we have for there. And also, we're going to be dealing with, when we get into February 11th, which is 2 days from now, we're going to see that band again that we always see. That pink color is that mix between snow and rain. So this is going to affect those upper western areas of New York. Pennsylvania looks to be out of the mix for this, mostly rain. But when you see these yellows here, guys, that is 4 inches of rain. And that can come quickly. That can come over one day. In fact, let's look. Let's see how long it takes. So it's actually a band that stays together. Looks like it begins over Mississippi, and then well, both Alabama and Mississippi areas will get this. Now, whenever you see the yellow, again, you match up to the chart here. That is 4, sometimes 6 inches of rain in these areas, but that band seems to be staying together, and then it stretches out over the top of, over through West Virginia and then Virginia itself. And then we see it move into the bottom part of Pennsylvania, just above Delaware and Chesapeake Bay, and it completely covers the area of Long Island. So Long Island, even though you're not getting snow, you may be getting dumped on with 6 to 7, maybe even 8 inches of rain because of this storm. And then to the north of that, we have our wintry mix band, and then anything north of that will be heavy snowfall. So Mateo is not letting us down, that's for sure. I'll back it up one more time. We'll take one more look at the movements here. It's always important, guys, to look at these movements because it gives you an idea of how these highs and low pressures work. So this high pressure is clearly pushing down this second system and will eventually cause other states to experience what areas of northern Indiana, Detroit, and Chicago are experiencing right now, depending on how low the jet stream goes. I know, very sounds like a broken record, but this is exactly how it works, and this is what determines where these systems go. A storm system is nothing without its steering factors. We need things to steer the storms, and that's what our jet stream does. Our jet stream is a constant flow of air. It's very high altitude air, but what it does is it is what pushes these storms into certain areas, and then when you mix it with upflow during this part of the season is when you start seeing that warmer air moving up from the Gulf. That's why February is such a popular month for storms in the Northeast. You're getting this moisture coming up from the Gulf, and then these cold temperatures from these jet stream dips, and they always just seem to want to hit right in this area. So February is a big month for the winter storms. But hopefully sooner than later, guys, we can stop talking about these winter storms. We can get into spring. We can talk about Easter if you guys want to. Anything other than snow. I am so done with snow. I seriously do not care if I ever pick up a shovel again. In fact, I would love to never pick up a shovel again unless I'm throwing it in the garbage. So, with that said, I hope everyone's having a great weekend. I will be back later on this afternoon with a video, maybe another topic. We're going to cover some storms going on around the world. We do have about 4 different invests in the South Pacific and the Indian Ocean. So there's a lot going on, guys. And then before you know it, we are going to be right back in hurricane season. And I did a poll a couple days ago, and many of you that follow my channel, and I know a lot of you are very knowledgeable in weather, and a lot of people are expecting a pretty active season, and I agree with that. I'm not saying it's going to be anything like 2005. It very well may be. It could be hit or miss. It could be a weaker system. We just don't know yet. It all depends on how quickly these conditions start to develop. And from what I'm seeing, these temperatures warming up down here already, we have a bleed going in through this gap. Remember this gap we always talked about with Nate? Nate always comes to mind when I think about this gap now because it shot 23 miles an hour right through this gap and then kind of died out right before it went to Alabama and Mississippi near the panhandle of Florida. So when you see that 80-degree water starting to bleed into the Gulf, you know right then and there that's the beginning of spring, basically, for the Northeast at least. And those are the temperatures needed to sustain tropical storms. So this will eventually move into tropical storm season, but we are still dealing with storm after storm after storm of these winter name storms. Again, I don't know what determines how they name them. I'm not saying I disagree with it. I actually think it's a pretty cool thing because it gives us, keeps things organized, if you want to say, when describing the situation. So once again, to conclude, guys, Chicago, Detroit, Northern Illinois, or Indiana rather, you guys are getting slammed right now, and then the next significant snowfall is going to be areas of Buffalo, Watertown, and then already the most snowfall ever seen in a season in Erie. You will see even more snow. So that's where we're at right now, guys. Once again, I hope you have a great weekend, and I will talk to you all in a couple hours. All right, take care. Bye-bye, guys.